Hello again. One of the problems with history is that it is very complicated and messy. It's not at all a neat series of self-contained narratives. This makes it very difficult to remember a lot of it. And to make it easier to grasp, we devise mythic narratives which simplify the past and allow us to model it into a series of simple stories that we can all understand and remember. Take European history in the 1930s and 1940s, for example. Ask anybody who was setting up and running concentration camps in Poland at that time, and we all of us trot out the glib answer at once. Please, sir, it was the Germans. There's no harm, of course, in believing that history really is that straightforward and uncomplicated, but it doesn't hurt sometimes to remind ourselves of the truth. Take concentration camps in Europe in the 1930s. I'm speaking now not of death camps like Treblinka or Auschwitz, although I'm going to talk about those shortly, but rather concentration camps where people were simply detained without trial because they were of a particular nationality, religion, or had the wrong political beliefs. It is sometimes forgotten when looking at developments in Europe during the 1930s that Germany and Italy were not the only dictatorships at that time. Spain and Poland were also run by men who distrusted and rejected the very idea of democracy. In 1926, Marshal Józef Piłsudski led a military coup, seizing control of Poland by armed force. At the head of a column of soldiers, he marched into Parliament and announced to the startled deputies, "I shit on you all." This action neatly illustrated Piłsudski's contempt for the democratically elected politicians who were running the country at that time. Shortly before Piłsudski's death in 1935, a concentration camp was opened in an old prison in the west of the country, which is now part of Belarus, which the official title of the place translates as Place of Isolation at Bereza Katushka. And it was established by Piłsudski for the detention of those whom he viewed as a threat to security, peace and social order. It was an old barracks block. It was extended by running barbed wire fences around it, very much as Dachau was. Dachau was originally a series of buildings, and they weren't built specifically as a concentration camp. They were disused buildings, part of a factory. They were also surrounded with a barbed wire fence to turn them into a camp. Thousands of people were held at Bereza Katushka, including journalists, communists and Ukrainian nationalists. These people were held at Bereza not because they had committed any crimes, but because the government didn't like them. Conditions were pretty grim there, and a number of those held in captivity died. There are two things to remember here. And the first is that Poland is very keen to make people forget about the fact that they were running a concentration camp years before the Germans invaded their country. The second is that a large number of Ukrainian nationalists were held prisoner in this camp because, of course, Poland hated and mistrusted the idea of a free and independent Ukraine. They felt it was a threat to their country. This is an example of Poland running a concentration camp. In the description to this video, I give a link to the Wikipedia article about Bereza. What about Ukrainians running a death camp, though? I doubt that any viewers would have heard about this. Of course, the Germans were responsible for setting up the extermination camps at Treblinka and Sobibor, both of which were in Poland. But the day-to-day running of the camps was in the hands of Ukrainians, who outnumbered the German guards at the camps by 4-1. In other words, 80% of the guards and soldiers at Treblinka, where over 1 million Jews were murdered, were Ukrainian rather than German. I have here 3 books, all standard works on the subject. That's Steiner's book, Treblinka. Martin Gilbert's book, Never Again, a lot about Treblinka in there. And this is Into That Darkness, which is a biography by Gita Serini of Franz Stangl, who was a commandant at Treblinka. Allow me to quote from page 166. Where are we now? To the left again of this central area, which is a section of the camp, were the quarters of the 80 Ukrainian guards. Right, there were 80 Ukrainian guards there. Across the street were the SS living quarters. 40 SS men were assigned to Treblinka at one time or another, but only 20 were stationed there at any time. In other words, in Treblinka were over 1 million Jews murdered in gas chambers. There were 80 Ukrainian guards at any one time and just 20 German SS people. I'm saying nothing of Ukrainians in general, you understand, especially the modern generation. But the fact is that the Holocaust in Poland would have been very difficult to carry out had it not been for the large number of Ukrainians who, as I say, formed the bulk of the staff at Sobibor and Treblinka. Viewers might have heard the Soviets denouncing Ukraine as being dominated by Nazis and wondered why they would say such a thing. Part of the answer is the memory of how enthusiastically some Ukrainians assisted the Germans in carrying out those millions of murders in Poland. This has, well, to my mind at least, as little relevance to the situation today between Ukraine and Poland and both countries and Russia, but some people have long memories. The Russians have long memories, so do the Ukrainians, and so do the Poles, which explains why history is constantly being tinkered with and why, particularly in those three countries, it's important that they establish a narrative which exculpates them from responsibility for some of the things that happened during the war and before it.